They are going to be talking about SQL data types. Isn't that exciting? Now we're going to be starting from the ground up and we're going to be giving examples. So if you don't know anything at all, that's fine. We're happy to have you here. Now, just a fair warning, what we're going to be talking about are concepts, which means there's going to be a lot of talking and not a lot of coding. And that might mean that you might have the instinct to click off this video before making it through the entire thing. I would implore you not to do that. This is a really important concept around SQL. And if you're learning SQL, this is something that it's really important that you understand. And with that said, I'm also going to ask you to hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave a comment so I know that these SQL videos where I'm teaching you how to code and teaching you about business intelligence is something that you want to watch. All right, let's jump in. So you've already heard me say in this video that data types in SQL are important. And you might be wondering, well, why is that? Well, let's pretend that you own a bookstore and you're trying to think about a way to organize your books. There might be a bunch of different ways that you might want to organize them. Maybe you want to organize one section by year, one section by genre, maybe another section by author, alphabetically. And databases are like the same thing. And the different pieces or types of data that we have are like books in our bookstore. And depending on the type of data, it changes the way that we want to organize or interact with that data. So let's first cover text data types. Now, the first data type that we're covering is called a char, C-H-A-R, and it's meant for storing fixed length pieces of text. So think about something like a license plate. You always know the same amount of characters that it's going to be, and there's no variability, unless you're one of those fancy people that gets a custom license plate, but that breaks us analogies, so we're not going to go with that. The next text data type is called a VARCHAR, V-A-R-C-H-A-R. And this is something where the length is flexible. So think about this like a web entry form on a text box. Different people have different length names. So, we might take one character all the way up to 200. Then finally, we have a text data type, which is meant for storing text. It's typically much longer. So think about, for example, a book. We're not going to store that in a varchar or a char field. Don't be insane. We're going to store it in a text field. The next piece of data types that we store are dates and date times. We also can store a timestamp, but for the purpose of this video, we're just going to focus in on date and date time. A date is something that's static without a timestamp. So think about your birthday or Christmas. A date timestamp is something that includes both a date and a time. So think about this as maybe the time that you badged or you clocked into work. Then finally, the last core data type that we have are numbers. The first number that we have is an integer. This is a whole number. So let's just say, for example, you are counting up the total number of shoes that you have. You can't have half a shoe. That's going to be an integer. Now, when you store an integer, the server always dictates a certain amount of space to store that integer. But what that means is that if you have a really big number, so for example, like the number of stars in the galaxy, sometimes you run out of space. And so there you need a data type called a big int. Now, finally, you might be wondering, well, what if I have a number like a currency or dollar value that can contain decimals? Well, that's where the decimal data type comes in, which you can essentially specify the precision of or the amount of decimals that you want to contain, and the SQL server will store that number of decimals. Now, this isn't all of the data types in SQL. There's quite a few more, including something like, for example, a binary data type, which is a true or a false. And depending on the type of SQL server that you are using, you might have access to either more or less data types than I just listed off. But these are some of the core data types that you need to understand before we get into building a table. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. And if you made it all the way here and you appreciate the time that I took to make this, please consider subscribing. It really helps keep me motivated making these videos, and helps to contribute to what I'm trying to build here on this channel, which is a community of people that love business intelligence and are interested in it. And if you're interested in learning more about me or what I do professionally, feel free to check out my LinkedIn down in the video description. Thanks for watching.